Erland Island is a long strip of land just off the coast of Sweden, dotted with at least 16 Iron Age ring forts. The island is disproportionately covered with ring forts compared to other locations in Sweden, with some forts only being separated by a few miles. So what was happening in Erland at the time these forts were being made, and what were the people of Erland so afraid of? Diving into this story will lead us into a horrific time period in continental Europe. The Roman Empire was crumbling, and with it crumbled the political and societal stability that had marked most of its reign. This period, at the beginning of the Dark Ages, was known as the Migration Period, and ushered in some of the worst times to be alive. When the Roman Empire finally fell in 476 AD for factors far beyond the scope of this video, it plunged Europe into chaos. Barbarian warriors had been hired as mercenaries by the Roman army for centuries, but when the gold stopped coming, they returned home. This period of invasion, disease, instability, famine, and war was a terrible time for humanity. Some of the warriors who returned home to Erland Island came home with riches and treasures from their exploits. According to archaeology.com, quote, archaeological evidence suggests that shortly after the fall of Rome, around 480 AD, Erland's social harmony collapsed along with its economy. Suddenly, the island was full of unemployed soldiers, all of them fingering their swords and eyeing their neighbors' shining gold. To protect themselves, people had already begun to build ring forts, in a phenomena that seemed to be limited to Erland. Small farms and hamlets were moved closer to the safety of the walled forts that were built to withstand serious assaults. The forts had high earthen walls and gates built using techniques brought home from Rome, with signs of crenellated ramparts and arched gates. The houses were arranged in a circle along the inner wall and with a central block of houses in the middle. Archaeologists have identified at least 16 forts in the island, all built at roughly the same time using nearly identical plans. While this video is not a full exploration of the dark events that happened at Sandby Borg, some too gruesome and heartbreaking for me to even want to discuss, a short overview is needed if we are going to ever fully understand why this island was peppered with forts. First, let's consider the island's geography itself. At this time, being surrounded by water wasn't a safety feature. It was an endless attack surface. The flat interior of the island had no mountains for refuge, no high ground to fortify, and no dense forest to hide a community. While a couple of these forts had angular walls, most were circular in shape, defendable from any direction. So what happened at Sandby Borg, and what does it teach us about this fortified island? Sandby Borg is an ancient crime scene, the exact specifics of which I urge the viewers to go and read more about if they wish to do so. In short, 14 people were executed in this fort sometime around 480 AD. The lack of defensive wounds and other details make researchers absolutely certain that these were not victims of a normal battle, but a deliberate massacre. The echoes of this atrocity stayed with the fort, with modern villagers remembering their parents telling them not to play near the fort, far before the crime was uncovered in 2011 by archaeologist Helena Victor. To better understand what it would have been like to be herded into an Iron Age fort under threat of attack, I flew to Sweden and drove to Erland Island to hike to what I think is one of the best preserved of the 16 forts. So this is an Iron Age fort called Ismantorp Fort. Hope I got that right. It was built and used between 300 and 600 AD. And what's really interesting about this place is that it was inspired by Roman-style forts and camps. So as you can see, there's all these foundations of houses that would have been built inside the middle here, and then the walls used for defense. All in all, they've found 95 sets of foundations all laid out over this place. Now, 300 to 400 AD would have been a really interesting and violent time to be on this island. You're in the Baltic Sea. You're vulnerable from basically people coming from the Finnish side and people coming from the Swedish side as well. So you pretty much have to defend from both sides, which makes sense because this is one of a long string of forts and settlements that go down right the spine of this island. So it's kind of like they were grouped up in the middle here and defending themselves from both sides. Let's go ahead and try to get to the path, walk through this place. I really, really wonder what it would have looked like with all these buildings built up with walls. Yeah, we're inside of one of the workshops, barns, or stables that would have been here at the time. It's so much larger than I thought it would be. You think of a fort, you think of like a small location. You don't think of something that'd be this crowded with this many buildings inside it. And I don't suppose there's any way for them to tell now just exactly how high up the wall went. But I mean, this is a good distance across. I'll do some Google Earth measurements and pictures from the top to kind of give you a better idea, but it's extremely round. The wall that's left is pretty tall for being 300 to 600 AD. It's at least 8-10 foot tall in places. What must it have been like to be in this place when it was being attacked? I cannot imagine. Wow. Beyond the fort, back in the woods, a couple kilometers is an Iron Age village that we're going to check out right after we're done exploring the fort. Man. Honestly, the best view of this place will be the drone shots that I pop in here. It really gives you a perspective of how it's laid out. So you can kind of see a little bit of the structure from here. So you have the spines of, I believe they said they were animal pens on the outside with only one end, leaving the front open. And then there's houses on the inside. So you got the stalls for the animals going around the edge. And then you have that big wide path. Then you have the houses in the middle, or workshops, whatever. Now I did say this was not used for super long-term living. It was probably used just for times of defense. You know, you pull in all your animals. You know, someone's coming, you pull all your animals in here, and then you can work on weapons and repairs in there and have your food supply, animals, horses on the outside. I guess there'd also be the additional benefit that whoever's close to the wall probably gets killed first, and that's your cow and not yourself. So there's probably that to be taken into consideration.